All right, thanks everyone. So this is actually a non-technical talk, so to speak. And what I will be sharing is few of the learnings and experiences that I think will be helpful for you to make a case for Yocto project in your organization. And essentially what I believe is a lot of this comes from developers, and therefore having this to make a case to your management, other stakeholders and key decision makers is actually very helpful. So I will go over a few of the things that how it works, and my key message is always that perseverance is the key. You will have a lot of times if based upon where a company stands in terms of their open source adoption, it might take a lot longer than in some cases, it might be just another project. But you have to persevere, and there always will be another project out there or other teams or other vendors who are vying for the similar kind of projects. So you have to be aware of all that. So what's very important is you have to formulate the problem statement rather than using the project. Generally, you want to solve a business problem and then fit the solution rather than saying it would be nice that we used Yocto project for all our embedded Linux. That kind of argument doesn't fly. We developers, essentially, they understand what all a tool can do and where all it can fit. However, you have to be very crisp about the use case where you are trying to fit it, because essentially it may eventually be used in several other cases, and it may be where you envision it to be, but that's not where you will start. You will basically have to make a very specific case for your management where this project would be used. And so think about that use case and put your thoughts around where it can be done, specifically for Yocto project. Read through, work with the community, find out whether a particular use case you are looking for is something that is well supported, and therefore prepare your feature arguments and go with that. Understand your company's software procurement. It's very important, especially if it's a large company. There are certain procedures that they follow for procuring software, and it becomes a lot easier if you can make a case through the same channels, because most of the times all processes are in place, and it becomes a lot helpful for you, because your project will come as an open source project, and you may not be following the same process for that, or maybe there is no process that is existing for consuming open source. Therefore, talk to your procurement folks, understand what your procurement procedures are, what kind of information they look for, and go back to your problem statement and add all that information and to satisfy your procurement policies, and how project can help. Some of the typical questions are around support, around security, and cost. And so it makes you think in those directions quite a bit, and you can associate those into your proposal quite well. So highly recommend that understand what your software procurement processes are. And it's very important that you associate how the project, if used, into this particular new product or whatever you're working towards, how will it improve your bottom line? In business, everything else is secondary if you can show that this improves your bottom line in some ways. You can associate a lot of costs to it, and there could be development costs, there could be time to market costs and others, but you have to prepare that material based upon, say, if you were to go with a proprietary RTOS, and if you were to go with Yocto project when you're doing your your RTOS-based standalone applications, or your managed application runtimes using Linux, and how this will help. And how does it improve your time to market? Many times you will have your project plans that will define timelines. And so if you can make a dent in there where you say, yes, we are estimating 12 months for this, but if you were to use Yocto project, we could deliver it sooner. And it's very, very important that you highlight that if you can. And this goes a long way in making a case for the project adoption. As I said earlier, these are key pieces that the decision makers would be looking for when they will give you a go-ahead. Once you have that understood, what is your transition plan? So many times you have a case where it's a new project, you get a green field. Often that's not the case. In many cases, you will have legacy, which means you have an existing software that's running in some form, maybe using some other operating system, or maybe another standalone app, or what have you. So what is the transition plan if you are going to use Yocto project? And that transition plan has to be explained really well. So say if you were using another Linux and you want to use Yocto project, then what does your workflow looks like? How would it fit into the both ecosystems meanwhile you are doing the transition? So all that has to be explained well in your transition plan. And how long will it take when it is done, right? So many cases you will have the transition plan that runs for long, but essentially you will have to assign certain timeline to it. So by the time you will have the products moved to this one. So think about what this transition plan looks like, from where are you coming and where you want to go, and with the Yocto project. And it's very, very important. This question will come in, and I covered a little bit, is what is your support plan? Support plans are basically either you buy support from third parties, or you build your in-house support system. It doesn't have to be one-to-one with what you are doing today. Support plan around open source projects vary a little. It could also mean that you participate and support the project, thereby get larger support back. Or it could also be that we develop in-house know-how to support ourselves, because now that we have all the source code, we can do that. Instead of, say, if you were getting a proprietary OS to support yourself. So, so think in those directions, how open source support can be a little different, but give you the end result that your management is looking for. And address the business risks. There obviously will be a lot of business risks that will be posed to you, and there will be a lot of questions that will be asked to you, and there has to be some mitigation plans. What happens with your IP? What happens with your exposure, security, and other pieces? So address those business risks. And the Yocto project does have few initiatives that helps you define this. And if you need more information, always reach out to the community and ask for material or specific areas of for support. And it definitely is something that will help you to mitigate those business risk questions that will be asked of you. Bring industry experts. So many times you may be new to Yocto project, but it sounds like a right solution for you, and you may have you may be well served by inviting some of experts and getting to know about the project, and let them talk to your decision makers and answer some questions. And they can be your allies, in making your case, and help sort out a few things. Many times people like it when they hear it from others too. And so it goes a long way. If you find that is useful, it's always good to get some industry experts in. It could also be very helpful to bring some of your company folks to these kind of events where Yocto project is present, and let them see around and talk to folks and project members, and have their own learnings as well. So try to act as that bridge between your organization and the project. And that can answer a lot of hidden questions that you really don't have to then cater for. Create demos. I think that's one most effective things that I would suggest is that goes a long way, is when you are making a case, you do a lot of proof of concepts, create demos using the project, demonstrate how it helps you, how it will help you, where it is, where we'll get started. It formulates a mental model in everybody's mind that how good, what is the state we are starting here. So look at what product you're building or which project you're targeting. Pick a SBC or open board. If nothing else, we have QEMUs, right? So you pick QEMU. But if you can get something that's closer to your hardware that you're thinking of to use, that's even better, because that gives a much more real view for your management. And do a lot of those demos, invite people, do brown bag lunches, to make a case for, hey, we could do this router or this video product or what have you, a kiosk. This is here is how it runs on Raspberry Pi, and this is what it looks like. This is what will be our starting point. So that creates a lot of good vibes and trust among the decision makers. So this is the final advice. Collect data and present it in a more readable format. Opinions never work. One of the execs I talked to, they said that if you have data, then let's hear it. If it is about opinions, then let's take mine. And that's very true. Opinions do not work as much as the data works. So I always suggest collect enough data and make a case with data, rather than saying it will be good, it's a good project, it's a good community. Those things are added advantages, but they will not move the needle as much as the data will move the needle towards it. So eventually, I think you also have to look through the culture of your company, where you stand in your open source journey. You start with a user or with a consumer, and then you become a participant, and then you become more like a contributor, and then you become more like an influencer and a maintainer. And you may be at a different stage in this, what I call, path to realization. And based upon that, your cases will vary. if you're at a very early stage, your culture is not very is new to open source, you might have to answer very trivial questions that you will say, why would somebody ask this question? Like things like, hey, why do people do open source, right? And it's a valid question for someone. So answer it nicely, answer it with the reasoning behind why people do open source. And in many cases, they may say, hey, open source is free for everyone. Why do I want to give my software out there? And so those are genuine questions based upon where they are in terms of their open source journey. And understand that if you are a developer who are already participating in here, you are in a position where you can understand those questions, and help your organizations understand them and answer them. Thank you. That's all I had. So thanks for listening to me.